Hey, just want to say what's going on to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everyone enjoyed their 4th of July holiday. Coming back with another video. I just want to also always take time to thank those who have subscribed, who's continue to watch the videos, who support and pass this information on. Continue to stay tuned because I'm going to try to keep putting out more material. If those who are new or those who don't remember the website, it's www.rebuildingcommunitytrust.org. As always, with a new video, I put out new material to back up the video itself. In the news and resource section, there is a new article blog that I posted concerning today's topic. So in the last video, a couple of videos, I mentioned that I'm going to take a different turn. Basically, getting away from the actual law enforcement side of things, this video, and talk about active shooters. So active shooters is really one of the biggest things that's going on right now. It's more or less it's getting out of hand. It's there's a lot going on with that over the last 2 decades, and just kind of want to touch on some highlights and touch on some stuff with it. Always do a definition of active shooter. Always want to present a definition to kind of break down what is active shooters, mass killings. I've looked at different training curriculums, law enforcement and military curriculums that discuss active shooters, and basically, to put it in perspective, and through the Department of Homeland Security, is an individual or individuals that's actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. So when we talk about engaging in killing, so we're talking about public buildings, we're talking about churches, schools, movie theaters, concerts, anything where it has a masses, a harbor of people that are there. So we can go back to so many different versions, so many different shootings back in the last, like I said, 20, 30, 40, even 40 years, where, the main ones was the Olympic Centennial bombing in Atlanta. There's the Timothy McVeigh and his accomplice trying to they took out their whole building in Oklahoma. We know about 9/11. We know about the Fort Hood, the Washington Navy Yard. This one is recently passed with Virginia Beach shooting, where 12 people were killed. In a public building too, and off of downtown Municipal Court in Virginia Beach. We had one in Dallas where the shooter attempted to try to take out people there in the federal building. So it's always where a group of people congregate at, and that's where a lot of these active shooters take place. So when we talk about active shooters, we talk about those individuals, they using weapons, high caliber weapons, 9mm guns, or any type of weapon, shotguns. I think the Navy Yard shooting, one of the shooters used a shotgun, high caliber weapons, rifles, and they had a lot of semi-automatic rounds where the killer can go in and shoot as many as he can in a short amount of time. In closed spaces where where it's more likely people will be, where they can't get out, and he wants that shooter takes the target. And he targets different individuals that are going to be there. It's a real scary thing, especially when it's dealing with the churches. As on a religious standpoint, when you're dealing with the churches, that's a place where schools too, but that's where you're supposed to be safe. So when you're targeted at a school with young kids, teachers, when you're targeted at a church, a place of worship, goes back to that shooting in the mosque in New Zealand, where many people congregated, and it was shootings there that took out so many people, injured and killed people. It's really getting bad when you have to target places such as churches and schools. We talk about Columbine, we talk about Sandy Hook, one of the most prominent shootings. Columbine was really huge back when it came out, when it happened, more or less. It was so many people hurt and paralyzing, or getting teachers to train and use weapons, and that's something that I did asked a couple of numbers, talked to some people about it. That's teachers, and I have a friend. He lives in Miami, and he's a music teacher. And I asked him the other day about it. What do you think about teachers having weapons? And he really disagreed. He felt like that it shouldn't happen, and just thinking it over as getting the responses and talking to different other people that's teachers, they're not mentally they'll have the composure. He said he didn't have the composure to shoot someone, and especially when it's a high pressure situation. You know, when military were trained to shoot, and the police, they're law enforcement, they're trained to react to, you know, shootings or high pressure situations. And when you're not trained for that and you just trained to shoot, you know, when you have someone actually, when it's live and when it's happening in real time, you're not going to be able to make that decision to pull that trigger to defend those kids, or you get nervous, or say, you know, the mental aftermath of dealing with shootings of that caliber, it can affect you. You know what I'm saying? It can, you know, if say it's one a child that you taught gets killed in the aftermath, or something happens to that child, or you're dealing with, you seeing dead bodies, or you hear shooting and you're hearing the chaos, the mental effect of that on that individual, that teacher, or that when it's not trained, it can do devastating effects. And I think it'll be worse off if they, you know, use weapons, especially if they're not trained or they're not ready in their mental state to deal with that type of environment. I thought some notes in there with domestic terrorism. A lot of people throw domestic terrorism in there, especially when you're dealing with 9/11, the Pentagon crash. You're dealing with that Timothy McVeigh. You're dealing with Fort Hood. You're dealing with these different real big active shooters, and they're classified as domestic terrorism, which it is. But for, you know, when you're dealing with shootings like the AR shooting, or you deal with schools, you know, it's kind of active shooters and mass killings, it can fall under domestic terrorism. So some of the things to think about when it comes to the training piece, you know, how can we minimize or prevent active shooters? You know, it's a very debatable topic, and it's hard to actually stop it because you don't never know what a person's mind. You never know what they're going through. There's training, FBI. I put on the blog. You can check it out. And it's also a link in there where it's the FBI. They did a whole page report. I think it's like 200-300 pages where they talk about they're doing research and they trying to look at behaviors and patterns and variables to determine what should we look for. If I'm working at a government building, if I'm working at a school and I see signs and I see different behaviors, how can I start minimizing and deducing that this person's going to, you know, commit a possible active shooter? They're going to go in there with a gun one day. You know, it can be a range from it can be anybody, because it can be from a government employee, it can be a teacher, it has been students in schools that went and got guns. It could be anyone, churches members. It's a shooting in Tennessee a few years ago when I was at my old church, where a guy in the congregation, he went and got a gun and started shooting the church up. It can be anybody. So what the question is, how can we minimize? You know, so when we talk about training, you know, whether it's annual or semi-annual or quarterly, we have to have some type of training has to be done to where a drill, something ran to where say, hey, you know, we're training in case this thing may happen. Let's hold a training where we can look at these behaviors. We can show, okay, if this person is acting differently, if this person is having any animosity with the school, is he disgruntled, or is he feeling some type of way? Has he been mistreated and he's been talking? You can see his behavior. You can see how he acts. You know, how can we start, determining those factors? Especially in the schools, with teachers, again, a lot of debate whether teachers should have weapons, but if not to that point, let's do training. You know what I'm saying? Let the school resource officers, let those security guards do training to where, hey, we're going to run a drill once every 6 months, once every quarter, and we're going to stay abreast on our fire drill. And you do our fire drills, we do our tornado drills, we do, we have maps, we have different, where we know our exits, we know where we go to hide. Let's do the same thing for active shooters. I'm going to post some charts and stuff on the webpage once this video is finished and edited, that is going to show you exactly what do you do. What do you do if you're an active shooter? What do you do when you hear gunshots? I've talked to people. I've done some interviews. I've talked to different people where, for one guy, again, I talked about the security course that I took, where it was one of the instructors was at the Navy Yard when the shooting happened, and he heard gunshots. And at first he thought it was something small. It could be a chair fell or something. Then he heard gunshots, and he heard people screaming. And then he heard, and then it's escalated from there. What do you exactly do? What are your mindset? You know what I'm saying? When we have someone, you hear gunshots going off. You know, you know, you can barricade yourself in the room. You know, there's tactics where you can, you know, if fighting is a last resort. So when you think of fighting, it's a last resort where that active shooter, that person is coming to that space, and you have no choice but to fight. But that's not your first option. If you can get out, and this is again where the training comes in, because we can look at it and say, okay, we know our exit signs, we know where we can get out at. If we are training annually, semi-annually on where our exits are, as soon as something happens, we know we have multiple ways of getting out of the building safely and quickly, and taking to make sure we reach out to others and get them out as well. So we can minimize casualties. So this is why training is so important, especially in the schools. We have so many young kids, and they're going to be scared. They're going to be panicking. They're not going to know what's going on. So it's our job, you know, as training professionals, security professionals, and of course the teachers, that we train our teachers, because they're not going to be focused on that. They're getting a job to where they're teaching our kids. They're not going to be focused on, oh, I got to make sure I'm going to be a security personnel as well. That's our job. That's security personnel. That's the police officer's job. That's the security guard's job. That's the principals, and making sure they work together and come with some type of plan to where all these individuals are being protected, and they're training, again, annually, to make sure that they're aware of our students. You know, let's protect our students. Let's find a way out. If they can't get out, let's barricade. Let's make sure we're locking our doors. We're reaching out to law enforcement, and we're staying put. If at last resort, if you have to fight, then you get cover and you stay low. And if you have to take the individual down, more to strengthen numbers. Not so much in so much of a classroom setting, because you got kids and they're gonna be screaming scared, and it's probably gonna be tough. In that case, you'll probably barricade yourself and lock those doors and put stuff against those doors to make sure that the active shooter can't get in. But more so, if you're a government building, and in that case with the Navy Yard or the Fort Hood, where you have more, adults, where mostly men, and I'm barricading the room with 4 other guys, and I know that guy's coming down that hallway, and there's nowhere where I can get out or barricade myself, then I'm gonna have to be 4 guys. I'm gonna team up. We're gonna try to take this guy down. That's the last resort. Again, that's what we're not with law enforcement. We're trained, military personnel trained to deal with those situations. So again, fighting is the last resort. So with these active shooters today, we see the news. One of the interesting things with the governor of Virginia, I just heard this morning. I could put it on the page, the link, where he's actually taking a step to address gun laws. So gun laws, I mentioned in the blog as well, where we have to do more than just, saying certain single background checks. Mental health is a big deal. I talk about the veterans. Some of these active shooters is taking place are vets. They're either active duty or they're vets. And again, the VA healthcare system is failing to address these issues. We have to put more time into our veterans. We have to put more time into, screening our active duty military. That includes me, because I'm in active duty, and vets, to make sure that we're getting the proper treatment. We have been dealing with mental health issues and illnesses, PTSD. We're dealing with different issues. We have to make sure we're addressing getting therapy, or even medicine, or even self-help groups, all types of different therapeutic actions. And we can't hit, and it's not catching everybody. We purchase these weapons, and we're dealing with these our weapons, and we're making sure we're purchasing weapons. We need to make sure that we're doing our background checks thoroughly. We're making sure that we're, to the best of our ability, finding ways to screen those who purchase guns. And that's something that some of the interesting things that the governor, again, he's trying to pass a law, and it probably won't make it through, because again, I was saying that thing, the Second Amendment, our right to bear arms. That's something that's really gray area. That's teetering the fence when you're dealing with weapons. What I'm saying? So some of the things he mentioned: legislation requiring background checks on all firearm sales and transactions. Selling, renting, trading, or transferring a firearm must obtain the first results of the background check. Banning dangerous weapons, enhancements to the weapon, extra mags, extra scopes, and stuff like that. Black market parts. That stuff is illegal. That having a gun, he's trying to do something about that. Handgun purchase within a 30-day period. Lost and stolen firearms being registered. So those are some of the things. And again, I'll post a link that he's trying to present to the Senate and Congress, to the state and local governments, and even with law enforcement to, hey, let's kind of curb these gun laws. Tough thing. It may not make it, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure we putting this stuff out there, because again, Active shootings can continue to happen until we not only train for the psychological piece, the psyche piece, but training for the gun law piece. It's imperative to think about churches. So when the churches, you know, one of the things I've done in my church, I think I mentioned it a little bit before in my previous video, I had a plan. I was a director of security, so I made sure that, you know, I'm training the ushers and the deacons, the personnel that's standing at the door to know what to look for. You know, and I noticed in Virginia Beach and their city ordinance, you're not allowed to have a weapon on church or school grounds unless it's dire, unless it's, you know, and if I have one, that if it's absolutely necessary to save someone's life or defend myself, I can use the weapon. So, you know, dangerous, crossing that line with the law. Again, we're going to follow that law, but sometimes with all the stuff that's going on, depending on what area the church is in, even it doesn't matter where, but we have to protect our churches. We have to protect our places of worship. Having a plan, knowing, okay, something happens, how do we get out the church? How can we preserve life? Keeping the people safe and catching the stuff and being preventative with it and making sure that if there's anything going on, we can stop it. We can get police involved way before advance. We got to lock down doors, got to get people out to safety, get 911 on the phone, whatever measures that you have to take. All churches should be doing something, especially if you're a large church and you're dealing with multiple people. Know where it's safe. You have to have some kind of security plan. The bigger the better. Smaller churches too. Smaller churches are actually easier to maintain than larger churches because you got, you know, less people, you know, and, you know, depending on how big the church is. Our church was small, so I knew the exits. I knew how I can get people out, you know, and making sure people are safe. So it's a big deal. I took it seriously, and it kept people safe. So as churches, you know, we in schools and even government buildings, military, we do it all the time. We do active shooter training. We know our spaces. We know where we go. We caught up. We barricade. We get down on the ground. We make sure we take cover because bullets can ricochet. You know, you can lower you are to the ground. That's the bullets will hit you. They ricochet, but you're better off lower than standing straight up. You know, if you're evading, you get knocked. You know where your exits are, so you can get straight out. You might see people on the way, you get them out. When you're dealing with, if you got to fight, then we in that barricade space and that person's coming and we got to fight, That's the last resort. I'm going to put the chart on there so you can take a look at it. But with active shooters, we have to, it's a topic that's not discussed about. It's not big unless it happens. But, you know, people seem to forget about it, but stationed there now. But being there, talking to people and just getting, you know, ideas that's happened at 9/11, it was a big deal to them, and they was telling me how intense it was when dealing with that plane going to the building and making people just, you know, saying afraid and it's terrorists and people are still affected this stuff by today. It's been 2011. It's been almost 20 years and people are still affected by it. Terrorism lasts for a long time. That's why terrorism is a big thing, because terrorism is not a murder on the street, even though it affects that family. It's not like a homicide or a murder or something like that. It's just affecting large scales of people, and the media attention that it covers, it affects everyone. 9/11 happened. I was in high school, and that day was a momentous day because people was losing people in the building, in the trade center, and you know, it affects people to this day. Terrorism does that. It's a long stretch. So when you're dealing with active shooters, you know, Virginia Beach, that day when those 12 people lost their lives and it was nationwide cast out, that stuff affects, it's to the point where articles say they won't even speak the guy's name. They won't even talk about it because it was so powerful. So we have to really pay attention to these active shooters. Read the articles, learn the signs. If you're working in these type of jobs where you feel like someone is potentially they're buying weapons, or you just have an itch feeling, you don't sit on it. You know, go out and say what you got to say. Report it to who you need to report to. Talk to the individual. Sometimes even talking to the individual, they maybe look good on the outside, but they might be messed up on the inside. You just never know until you talk to them. And if you really feel deep down that this person is going to subject to pulling a gun and shooting or killing somebody in some form, you report it as soon as possible to the authorities. So you might save lives that day. Training is key. Reporting is key to stop some of these active shooters. And sometimes you're not going to know. Sometimes you can do all you can and all the training in the world. Sometimes stuff just happens. But if something does happen and you caught them in active shooter drill, you can't get out, you barricade yourself in. You put those doors locked, you put that stuff against that door, tables, chairs, anything heavy, and you barricade. And you get with 911. If 911 comes to you and they get the shooter out, do not make any sudden moves, because 911, their first job is not to rescue. They're going to clear the shooter first. Again, the first thing they're going to do is clear the shooter first. They're not going to go and rescue it first. They're going to look for the shooter, and then they're going to have a secondary, probably Bravo team coming in and rescue the survivors. If they tell you to do everything they say, you lay flat, you hands up, you don't make sudden movements, you do what you got, listen to everything instructed to you when they come through. Do not try to be, trying to run up on law enforcement, because they're not there to first, they find a shooter, and they mistake you a shooter, you're going to get shot. Lay low, listen to what they say, follow all commands. And then when they tell you to move, you move. If they get you first, if they're coming in there telling you to get up and go, you get up and go. But if you cannot leave the building and you feel like you're trapped, you barricade, you sit back, you make sure that you're safe, and you stay with 911 until they come. If somehow that person comes in that door, I'm not, it's situational, because everybody gonna be in there ready to fight. You have to try to fight that person. Either you fight or die, but hopefully that's the last resort. So again, just not to really touch on this stuff too long, but I just want to say for active shooters that this is something that we have to continue to train on, and just continue to be aware of. Later on, for just a quick update for us coming up, we're going to talk about stand your ground. I never forgot about that, because there's a couple of cases that I've found out that are interesting. I think you're going to get something out of it when it's stand your ground law. And I'm going to talk about juveniles, because that's a big, again, my whole thing is on the youth. And a lot of stuff with juveniles are coming down the pipeline, where they're going to get rid of that stuff and they're going to start trying out juveniles as adults. Got kids 16, 15, 14, 13 and below. This is you're going to stand by for that video, because there's some stuff that's coming out about juveniles. And sexual assault, get into that field very soon as well. And we're doing a lot of certifications and training to become a sexual assault prevention advocate. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm going to be bringing out to the table with that, because all over the news you're hearing sexual assaults. You're hearing about abuse from the kids all the way up to the adults, men, women, the celebrities, military personnel, you name it, police. It doesn't matter. No one is exempt from it. So sexual assault is going to be another good topic to talk about, and I got more stuff coming down the pipeline. So just continue to stay updated. I'm going to continue to turn a little bit from the basic stuff. If you have any requests or you have any comments or anything you want me to talk about, please leave in the comments below. Please look at the information on the page. I'm going to put some videos. I'm going to put some more material. Please pass stuff along, because knowledge is power. Once knowledge is power, you're being empowered to pass stuff on. Because again, if we don't know, lack of knowledge, it'll get you killed. Lack of knowledge will get you unfalsely treated. So let's continue to pass the stuff on. And we thank you for this video. Thank you for listening to this video, and have you blessed.